Welcome to the Grazing Grass Podcast, episode 17, where we talk with Daniel Griffith.
Product of seeing nature as not something that we work to optimize harvests, right? But something that we partner with to truly maximize our relationship.
You're listening to the Grazing Grass Podcast, helping grass farmers learn from grass farmers. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, share, comment, and leave us a review. We appreciate it. Daniel, we want to welcome you to the Grazing Grass Podcast. We're excited you're here tonight.
Hey, Cal, it's an absolute blessing to be with you. A big fan of the podcast and your work. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you, Daniel. Daniel, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your operation?
Yeah, absolutely. So our farm, our operation is run by my wife and myself and our three kids. We have three kids, 3 and under, and they're just absolutely a part of what we do. It's kind of a necessity. We kind of have to bring them wherever we go.
Yes.
But our farm, our operation is Timshel Wildland. We're a 400-acre regenerative and emergent conservation landscape here in the nestled into the Blue Ridge Mountains in central Virginia. We farm in the ecoregion we understand to be the Piedmont of the United States. Otherwise said, we live and farm in the microclimate sandwich between the Appalachian Mountains and the Atlantic coast and its coastline. And so it's a very special and very abundant place to be. Timshel Wildland is more or less a project, less of your standard farm. I mean, we look like a farm, we smell like a farm, we act like a farm. But our mission is to unify both conventional nature conservation and regenerative farming into something that we believe to be exceptionally abundant. Maybe even abundance that could be measured more in terms, or maybe defined in more terms of an emergent abundance. Basically working with nature to create abundant ecosystems instead of forcing nature into paradigms to hopefully then manufacture abundance. It's just a different way of doing it that we really feel comfortable with and love. On our farm, in our wildland, those two phrases are interchangeable here for this conversation. We run cattle, pigs, and sheep. Occasionally we'll do seasonal chickens, turkeys, and ducks. We have about an acre of veggie gardening and about that much land dedicated to food forest, berry guilds, and things like that, all more for homestead use. The drivers of ecosystem succession on our farm, really the foundation of what we do, is our cattle. We raise 100% grass-born, fed, and finished heritage beef for our community and a couple regional, national type buyers that we're just blessed to be partnered with. Our cattle breed is something that we really have fallen in love with. It's a traditional Irish Dexter. It's a heritage breed out of Northern Ireland, known for its thriftiness. It's docile in many ways in terms of temperament, but a very hardy breed that really thrives in this landscape, which is what we're looking for. We have maybe 100 head of those, of our Irish Dexters, and love that system. The pigs we have on farm, they're registered GOS, Gloucestershire Old Spot pigs. We actually accidentally stumbled upon a boar that is now on our farm that we use. He's our wonderful boar. His name is Sam Hamilton, named after John Steinbeck's character in East of Eden. We're literary buffs here. But he's actually registered in the UK as a GOS pig. And so he's actually decently a special pig here. Not that we were going for breed genetics, but that's just what we happened upon, and we love them to death. We'll raise 100 to 200 pigs a year here on the farm. They're really our movers and our shakers in terms of emergent abundance. What they're doing is foraging through the woodlands, the shrublands, the silvopastures, the grasslands, the riparian areas, really wherever we need that impact to really reset ecosystem succession and maybe divert it to go down a different path. And so we're really using them for the ecosystem succession, less for the pork, but hey, who doesn't like bacon in the process of regenerating an environment?
Right.
So, and then the sheep just follow the cows. We really actually run the sheep with the cows. more or less 9 days out of 10, they'll be with the cows grazing in what we would understand to be a flurd, flock of sheep, herd of cattle put together. Flurd is the terminology we would use. But yeah, that's just the high level bird's eye view of the wildland here. It's a blessing to be a part of such a paradigm challenging project that at the same time feels, tastes, smells like a farmed environment. So it's a really special place to be.
Now, on your journey to get to where you are today, how did that look? Do you have a background with livestock? Did you grow up on a farm? And then how did you get to this emergent abundance?
Yeah, now that's the question. The answer to that question is no, not at all. I have no background in farming. None of my relatives, none of my family members are farmers. I would probably venture to guess that the closest relative that I have to be a farmer would be my great grandfather, and he was more of a
Okay.
subsistence homesteader type farmer, if I understand the family lineage there. And so, no, I don't come from a family farming background, and I have almost no experience with managing livestock of any kind before we got into farming about 7 years ago. I was in college for computer science, information systems, and mathematics. Graduated with all of those degrees. Thought I was going into the tech field. That drive was really founded in my dad is a serial entrepreneur. Started many companies during our childhood. I'm a second son of four children, and we all worked in like the family businesses growing up, just learning different trades and how business works and getting some experience. And I always gravitated to his tech firm, software firm, website design, and stuff like that. And so I went to college fully expecting a life in that field. And then about, what was it? At the end of my freshman year, pushing a lot of details aside because we can have a 5 hour conversation about this alone.
Oh, yes.
I was diagnosed with a good number of different, I always say life-threatening diseases. And it really forced my life to turn. We spent years traveling the country. I dropped out of college. My mom and I spent years traveling the country, I should say, going to doctors, surgeries, tests, procedures. Spent many days in hospitals and just trying everything we possibly could to understand exactly what was going on in my body and what do we need to do to thwart it from really actually impacting or ending a life. And about 3 years into the journey, we tried everything from Western medicine, Eastern medicine, acupuncture to surgeries and everything in between. And I really was no better. And I was married to my wife by this time, and she was working full time, and I was more or less a vegetable. We were both living at my childhood home, my parents' house. We really didn't have another option. I needed that much care, and I was sitting on the back porch in the middle of the afternoon. It was a spring day, maybe March, maybe just getting into April. And I was sitting back in the back porch with a fire, kind of watching spring progress, and I was reading a book, and my mom came out of the back door, the back patio door, and she looked at me and she had a tear in her eye, and I'll never forget this moment. Um, and I looked at her. I said, "Mom, what's wrong?" And she said, "Daniel, we've tried everything. We've tried. Just there's nothing left to try. We've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, doing what we're being told needs to be done for your health, but you're no better. What if we tried something else? The only thing we haven't tried is raising chickens. Why don't we just try this?" And it was a moment of desperation, but it was also a moment of great hope because that same day we went on Murray McMurray's website. We bought 100 black Australorp chickens. We didn't know a single thing about raising chickens.
Oh, yes.
We didn't have, chicken tractors or mobile coops. We didn't even understand the difference between a chicken tractor and a mobile coop, between pasture raised and free range, and what kind of feed we needed to give to them. We knew very little to nothing. But it was a spark of hope that inspired a pretty long-term journey into where we are today, running and managing a multi-species, large-scale operation of our own full time. And so that was our journey into regenerative agriculture. Began in pain, moments of hope, and just exploded into abundance. Excuse me, where we are today in 2021.
Very good. Very good. So you got these
Yeah.
chickens. When did you branch out into beef cattle and your sheep and hogs?
Yeah, that's a good question. The first year we raised those 100 chickens and we ran a pretty intensive garden. I wouldn't call it a market garden in any way, but we really obtained most of our veggie foodstuffs from it that year, and we liked it. But what became quickly apparent was I'm not a gardener.
Oh,
I
yes.
really gravitated more towards the animal side of farming. My wife Morgan, she is a better gardener than I am. But I'll tell you, I can pull weeds for about 3 minutes and then I'm done. I got to move on. I just can't. I can't do it. And so we started working with a friend of ours who owned, and they still own, but they run a pretty great grass-fed and finished grass farm near us. I think they have about 200, 250 head of cattle.
Oh, yes.
Really got our feet wet there. They took us in. They told us what to do, and they even were patient enough to watch us fail a couple times. And we fell in love with the animal side of that, especially the larger ruminant side. Their farm's Royal Fair Farm in Northeast Ohio. Great people, mentors of ours today. Really just family or friends. At this point, they're marvelous. But anyways, that's where really a love for larger ruminants began and started to swell in us. It wasn't until 2000, oh, I don't know, 2016, I think, is when we got our first herd. We actually owned a herd, and we began by getting cow-calf pairs and started, actually breeding our own cattle here on this farm. And it's been an explosion since. Pigs, I have to say, I know we're going to talk about the book later in this, but there's a chapter in the book that talks about why we got sheep and why we got pigs, and it more or less was an accident. We when we started really managing this farm holistically, we 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 found that a good majority of the farm landscape was, especially the pasture landscape, was dominated by cool season, non-palatable forages,
Okay.
broadleaf weeds and things like that. And our cattle just wouldn't eat it. And we ran them really hard. I'm talking 300,000 pounds an acre, moving them one, two, three times a day. And they would just literally walk around these particular forages. Like they just wanted nothing to do with it. And so we increased herd density. I mean, we did a lot of things trying to get them to really impact those forages, really trample them down to see what would emerge the following season or even the following, period after the recovery, 30, 60, 90 days later, depending on exactly when we were in the growing season. And they would just walk around these plants. And a neighbor of ours told us that pigs really like these plants. So we bought a bunch of pigs and put them in the pastures trying to see if they would root them up, but they didn't. They would forage around these plants. And I'll let you read the book and get more of the nuance and poetry of the thing, just watching these pigs just like burrowing and burrowing and burrowing, and then they just go right around the plant as if it's like a traffic cone on a highway. And so another one of our neighbors was like, "Hey Daniel, listen, sheep are browsers. Like a sheep probably would love, this plant or this grouping of plants." And so we drove down to North Carolina, about 6 hours south, and bought 10 sheep, and we're like, "Okay, we got this, right? We're going to start devouring this plant now. We got cattle, we got pigs, maybe the sheep are going to do it." And the sheep didn't even touch it. Like it was worse than the cows. They just wanted nothing to do with the plant. It's not toxic, right? There's no extreme phytochemicals or secondary compounds that would threaten a ruminant or foraging animal, foraging omnivore from really consuming the plant. There was just something that was in the plant that none of these animals wanted, or wanted anything to do with, I should say it that way. And so we kind of just stepped back, and this is the point of that chapter. And again, I'll let you read it. I won't spoil it. But we stepped back and we looked at all the animals we had, and we were just like, okay, cool. Now we have the animals on farm. Let's change focus, reshift, or realign our context or our decisions with our context, and emerge from here. And so now, we have hundreds of cows, 100, 200 pigs, and a whole bunch of sheep. It was an accident. I guess that's a better answer. Totally on accident. We got into pig and sheep.
On your cattle, you started with cow calf. Did you go buy cow calf pairs or cows at a sell barn, or did you immediately get into the Irish Dexters?
Let's see. So we started with Irish Dexters.
Oh,
That
yes.
was the breed that Royal Fair Farm in Northeast Ohio the farm where we really got our feet wet or, shitty, whatever you want to say.
Right.
Um, and uh, and and we fell in love with the breed. It's a really special breed in the sense that, we always tell folks, we give wildland tours all the time here. It's pretty much a part-time job, is giving these wildland tours to guests of the farm here. And every tour we ever give, we always tell people that Irish Dexters have some of the best meat in the world, and that's not unqualified. That really is really true. In worldwide taste studies, Irish Dexters are ranked either second or third in terms of tenderness and marbling and flavor, deep, rich, unbelievable flavor. And so we say, hey, listen, Irish Dexters, these cows standing in front of you have some of the best beef in the world because they've never been bred for beef production, right?
Right.
Nature knows best. If we just keep these cattle genetics straight line through and through with a bovine, right, the ancient really form and function genetics and epigenetics as it should be, what comes out of this is really actually unbelievable. By pushing for hardiness and adaptation to landscape, not how fast a cow can grow, you really find that the abundance is much further on the one side than the other. Well, anyways, we fell in love with the Irish Dexters. They're also a smaller cow. Our hang weights on steers will range from 375 to 500-pound hang weights.
Okay.
So they're decently small. But we love that because they're really easy to handle. My wife and I can, be really more relaxed or calm around all of her animals, bulls included. We have 3 kids, 3 and under, and it's just a little bit nicer to have a kid next to a 500-pound animal or 6, 7, 800-pound animal, not a 14 to 1800-pound, Angus bull or something. So it's a different feeling around these animals than around just massive cattle. And so we fell in love with them there. And then the first animals we bought 12 cow-calf pairs from a farm actually in southern Ohio. The husband had cancer. It was more of a homestead, grass-fed operation. And they just wanted to vacate their herd. They wanted to move on in life and take care of their own health. And so we came in, we bought all 12. I think we bought 10 bred cows. Maybe there was a heifer in there. And then a couple calves came with it. And anyways, we ended up within, a month or two of purchasing the cows with 12 cows and calves. So cow-calf pairs. And we started the herd that way. Since then, we've acquired a good number of animals just by traveling around the country, buying different, bulls or heifers, or cows just from different farms where we like the genetics or we really like the management. I'll make that note here. I think it's really important when you're talking about building a herd to look more at the management that they come out of than the actual genetics. I mean, I've spent $2,000 on a perfectly pristine genetic bull that was, from a registry perspective, the best bull east of the Mississippi in terms of Irish Dexter cattle genetics. We got him here, and 2 weeks later, he suffered from 2 different hooves, or 2 different of his hooves had massive, massive hoof rot.
Oh, no.
So he was struggling with these really probably benign illnesses that when he came over, he was stressed, and just a different, management style and everything else just pushed him over the edge. The point is, not so much to dive into hoof rot because it's a very depressing, subject.
And smelly.
Yeah, and horribly smelly. Especially in cattle.
Oh, yes.
I mean, if a cow has hoof rot, it's bad.
Oh, it is.
It's really bad. But the point is, we want Irish Dexters, but the best cows we have are the unregistered Irish Dexters who came from really intensive, multi-species, truly regenerative, and holistically managed grass farms, not the really pristine genetic bull, right, with the pristine registry. Not that you can't have both. In fact, one of our missions is to actually create both, right? Take the registered animals, really adapt them to our landscape, and then we have both, right? That's
right.
The best of both worlds, obviously. Nothing against registries. It's just when we're looking at new cattle, we're looking at management, not registries. Management is the key there. And so that's what we've done. We've really traveled up and down the East Coast just buying different Irish Dexters from farms that we believe are really a very similar farm to ours. At least their management style is the same, right? When we drop a 2-strand or 1-strand polywire at the end of the day to move them to the next pasture, they're not wondering what is going on, right? They've done this every day in their old farm, and they're going to do this every day on their new farm. That's the most important part is management.
I think you really strike on an important chord there about management and bringing livestock in that can handle what you're doing in your management system. If a cow doesn't meet our management system, we're selling her. We're lazy farmers, so they got to work for us. I don't want to be out there taking care of them all the time, but I do fully agree that management is the key there.
Yeah, absolutely. I always tell folks I'm the laziest farmer you'll ever meet. It's just period. End of story. And I'm totally okay with that.
Right, right.
Like I am so happy to be a lazy farmer. There's no reason to overwork when the cows are the drivers of ecosystem succession, and we're just riding in the passenger seat,
Yes.
right? We're just directing their energies to a very purposeful end goal destination, if you will, using that analogy. But like I ain't driving. I can take a nap, right?
Right.
The cow, it needs to work. I love that analogy.
Yes.
But it's true. I'm a lazy farmer. I like it.
Very good. Now you brought in on accident trying to control some of your ecosystem there in your plants. You brought in the hogs and you brought in the sheep. What changes did you notice in your environment?
Yeah, absolutely. So what changes did we notice or observe when we really got our numbers on our farm in terms of the number of species, the different species operating in the farm, but also just more animals of each species on the farm? I mean, first and foremost, life returned, right? I mean, I think every regenerative farmer has a journey into that regenerative phase of their farming life when they really actually can see. And sometimes it happens on a Tuesday and it wasn't there on a Monday. But you see this life return, right? The dung beetles come and they colonize the manure patties out of nowhere, right? Like, where did these beetles come from, right? They were not here on Monday, they are now here on Tuesday, right? And then the flies come, and then the birds come, right? And then the grasshoppers come, and then the spiders come to eat the grasshoppers or whatever relationship they have, right? And then the ticks come. In this area of the world, it's just infatuated with ticks, or infiltrated by ticks, I should say. But then what you'll notice is, and by the way, I'm completely okay with ticks. I'll be the probably your only guest ever to say that. Um, what we have found is the more ticks we have in a pasture, like when we're moving our cattle, our pigs and our sheep through a particular pasture, right? The forage is 2, 3 feet high. And so we're walking through there with poly wires and step in posts, right? And the grass is just hitting our chest and there's ticks all over our bodies. In the beginning, we were just crazy worried about the thing. Today, what we found is those same pastures, we're actually seeing less ticks and more spiders, right? And so the spiders are actually coming in to predate on the ticks. We're having less ticks, but the spiders and what they're doing for the pastures are simply unbelievable, right? And so our story in trying to control a particular weed is really now told via the very emergent abundance of life returning to our farm in terms of pasture diversity.
Oh,
And it's
yes.
not just grass diversity or soil organism diversity, it's the diversity of all life. Like, another big thing for us is we love fly season. When the flies come and attack our cows, like a huge smile comes on my face because that same day, hundreds upon hundreds, if not thousands or hundreds of thousands, the whole sky just turns black of tree swallows and barn swallows and starlings, and they're just flying around the herd, and it's marvelous. It's beautiful, right? That is, in many ways, a very resilient ecosystem, right? And my job is to push, or at least co-pilot the push of emergent ecosystems turning into resilient ecosystems, right? We always say, what is it? Resilience is diversity in motion, right?
Yeah.
It's always moving forward. That is resilient, but it's diversity. It's the uniform diversity of all life pushing forward in a particular environment that then gives resilience. So I love fly season. I love tick season. That means more birds, more spiders. But on another side, right, getting off of the insect and aviation type life, what we found is our pastures are in, well, let me start over and say it this way. Every single year since we got the right number of animals on our place and really started to understand what is holistic management and how to manage this landscape holistically, we have watched the pastures evolve year over year, in terms of the stand and its makeup. So when we first moved down, it was just pretty much you had your weeds, you had your toxic weeds, and then you had your tall fescue. The second year, we started to see some toxic weeds recede, and we started to see some orchard grass come. And we were very excited. We're not big fans of tall fescue. It's very hot here, 90 to 100 degrees for many months in the summertime here in Central Virginia. Endophyte, what is that? Fescue toxicosis, I guess, is the technical term for fescue poisoning in cattle in the summer months. So the orchard grass started to come. We got very excited about that. Another great cool season forage. But today, like the book, and I keep mentioning the book, and I know we're going to get to it, but the book is titled Wild Like Flowers because when we give wildlife tours, we always say that our pastures, they're really not pastures because they're not grasslands. They're like wildflower lands, right? We have so many species of wildflowers popping up in our pastures, spring, summer, and fall, that like you can't take a picture of cows or sheep grazing or pigs foraging in a pasture without the entire picture just being this wildflower canopy above a grassland. And it's just absolutely gorgeous. From ironweed to milkweeds to crownbeard and everything in between, cool season, warm season, different wildflowers. Um, Black-eyed Susans, that's my daughter Elowen's
Oh, yes.
favorite. She's 3.5. She loves black-eyed Susans. But anyways, just life abundant in a very uniform diversity returned to our farm. And now, right, I look back at that time, and this is what that one chapter is about, where I describe this flow of life returning back to our farm. I look back and I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled the cattle and the pigs and the sheep didn't touch this weed. It's one of my favorite plants in our pastures today. That weed is actually crownbeard. In the autumn is just this beautiful golden, more like goldenrod, just all over the pastures. It's gorgeous. It's just absolutely gorgeous.
Very good. I want to talk before we go ahead and get to the overgrazing section. Let's talk a little bit about your management of your livestock. So, when we look at your management of your livestock, are you moving them often? You're using electric fence. How's that working?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so maybe now is a good time to insert. My wife and I, we run Timshel Wildland. We've made that known. We are also the director and co-director, my wife Morgan and I, of the Rabinia Institute, um, which is the Savory Institute's hub in the Virginia ecoregion. And so we work with Alan Savory and his team at the Savory Institute, Zimbabwe and Boulder, Colorado, to teach and really advocate what is holistic management. And so when we're talking about how we manage our animals, it really is holistic management. And we found that to be not just a very practical management system, a paradigm for really a decision-making framework. I shouldn't call it a paradigm, but a decision-making framework for managing complexity, right? Which anybody listening to this podcast who's ever looked at a cow or managed a cow understand that it's complex. It's not complicated, right? The machine engine, a diesel engine in your tractor is complicated. You can break that down into many different parts. Whereas a cow in its relationship to its ecosystem or its environment, that's very complex, right? You can't break that down in the same sort of way. Therefore, you're looking more at aspects, not parts. A diesel engine has parts, cows have aspects. Holes within holes is how that's described in holistic management. And so when we're looking to manage any sort of environment that we have, either leased land or deeded land, we typically at the very beginning of it start with a holistic context, which is a definition on paper of exactly how we envision the future and how we need to live today in order to make that happen, in terms not of goals, more of visions. And once that's put in place, right, you're able to elucidate, you're able to define in that holistic context what you're really at the core of your farm business or your relationship with the farm or your understanding of ecosystem process or environments, where you're trying to get to, right? Are you a cow-calf operation that sells breeding stock to other farms? Are you a cow-calf operation that sells your, calves off to the market? Are you a local grass-fed and finished farm going to the farmer's market, right? All of those different farm businesses or visions, if you will, require a very different context, right? If you're sending your calves down to the local market, you probably don't care if their beef is overly marbled or not. But if you're selling at the farmer's market where you're looking at your customers face to face and they're looking at the ribeyes or the sirloins or the New York strips or the porterhouse steaks, right in front of you, right? And they look at it and there's no marbling, and let's say they know beef, they're going to look at you and say this beef's worthless. Or maybe they buy it and then they taste it and it tastes no good, right? The point is exactly where you see your environment going is how you need to manage it. Or maybe the way that you want your environment to go is how you need to manage it. Maybe
Yes.
that's better said. The point of saying all of that is to say this: after you focus on crafting your holistic context, we work at creating a holistic plan grazing chart. That chart is created by the Savory Institute. We have found it's the absolute best way for managing complexity. That's what that chart's all about. And you work through the chart to understand exactly how you really do need to move your animals through a system. That system would be our farm in this case, to maximize not only what we understand our context to be, right, but the necessary ecosystem processes, water cycle, mineral cycle, community dynamics, energy flowing through the system, the diversity that I'm talking about, reaching that max emergent abundant phase. So you learn how to do those things via your animals or via whatever you're managing. In this case, it is animals. A lot of complexity there, maybe not exactly what you're asking, but I'll answer your question simply with this. That holistic plan grazing chart tells us exactly how to move our animals, not how. It really elucidates for us why we get our animals here, right? When we move them there, how do we want their behavior to be when they get there, right? In which sequence do they arrive there? Do you put the pigs in front of the cattle, the cattle in front of the pigs, right? Sometimes you do one and sometimes you do the other, but it's about managing complexity. That's what it's all about. And so in order to do that, sometimes we move our cows 2-3 times a day. Sometimes we leave them in an area for 3 days straight. Different examples might make this a little bit more clear. If we're grazing a grassland that we want very uniform ecosystem disturbance, we'll graze them at half day or 1 day intervals at the same paddock dimensions and that kind of stuff. So they're moving levelly through a landscape. If we're going through a landscape that we know, and let's say we're early April grazing in an ecosystem that we know has a lot of toxic cool season forages in it, right? We don't want to allow those cool season forages to emerge in mid to late May, if not early June. And so we really might just stock them there for 3 days, really turn that area into a mud puddle to thwart the toxic forages from sprouting and emerging, so that we have the ability to graze that or re-graze that area in June or July. Or we might come back and broadcast seed or bale graze it right there and allow the seeds and the hay to sprout in that very open and receptive environment. And so when we're talking about management, we use polywire and step-in posts, right? Like most grass farmer, regenerative, rotational grazing folks out there. But how long or why or how we are grazing in a particular spot is really open for debate on what that spot needs or what our cattle need. Sometimes it's once a day, sometimes it's 3 times a day, sometimes it's once every 3 days.
Right, and that makes sense.
Does that answer your
Yes,
question?
that makes sense because it's really what your vision is for what you're doing there, and you're going to modify your management practices at that point based upon where you're going.
Yeah, and where you want the environment to go, right?
Yes.
I mean, simply moving your cows to the next paddock on Monday and then the next paddock on Tuesday because somebody told you on YouTube that you're supposed to move your
Yes.
cows every day, right? That's accidental abundance.
Oh, yes.
If you actually are regenerating, you're regenerating because YouTube told you to, right? And not that moving your cows, that's a great start, right? There's farms are complex environments. They're complex things, and all life is complex, and all the relationships within life and within the farm are equally or even increasingly complex. And so learning how to sit in the driver's seat, right, to steer or to guide the drivers of ecosystem succession to a state of truly emergent and just immaculate abundance, right, that is as much a science as it is an art. And so how you get there is open for every journey. Simply moving your animals is great. Start there. That's what we did. We started moving them every day because that's what Joel Salatin said in all the books we read, and Salatin and I are good friends, and I still agree with that. Like, that's a wonderful place to start. But then start to read your animals, right? Start to read your farm business, start to read your environment, and understand that sometimes you need to move them twice a day, right? Sometimes you need to move them a little bit more slowly. Sometimes they're calving and you weren't expecting them to calve. They might be a little bit early, they might be a little bit late, maybe they got bred and you didn't understand it or mean to. And it's 95 degrees tomorrow and you're going to move them to a completely open pasture that has no tree cover. But like, hey, why not calf in the shade? Today you have shade. Leave them in that spot,
Right.
right? Shade is more important than forage. Forage is not always the ultimate goal. And so, every day is a decision. And talking about being lazy farmers, just bringing this full circle, it is marvelous to wake up in the morning, right? To go out to see the cows and look at them and ask, right? Just walk up to a cow and just look at it and be like, are you hungry? Like, do you need to move? Right? And learn. And I'm not just saying some like, hokey pokey kind of stuff. Like have a relationship with your animals, yes. But learn about body condition and the telltale signs of an animal being hungry or full or whatever. And understand that like maybe the best part of rotational grazing and the best part of regenerative agriculture in this moment is to not do anything.
Right.
Don't do anything, just be, just relax, just understand that sometimes staying in place is the best place to be. And so it's a very fun, it's a very flexible, it's a very dynamic management style that allows us to be wherever we need to be in order to reach our goals. And goals is a problematic word. I probably should say in order to reach the future that we're trying to create, right, in our holistic context, which is not a goal. Yeah, it's fun. It's complex. It's managing complexity. It's really partnering with complexity, which we really love. That's our favorite part of the farming system.
Very good. You said a lot there that, there's so much to the art of it, and it's not just you're following this recipe. There's a lot to it.
Yeah, most definitely.
Daniel, let's move to our overgrazing section. For everyone out there, it's a new section we're trying on the podcast where we take a deeper dive into a practice or something of our guests. And today we're going to talk about a book coming out from Daniel. Daniel, can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, I would love to. So I just wrote and published. It's up for pre-orders starting Monday. What is it? February 15th, I believe. It's a book called Wild Like Flowers: The Restoration of Relationship Through Regeneration. In many ways, it really is a book about regenerative agriculture gone wild. We really like that description of the book in the sense that it's about regenerative agriculture, yes, that's true, but it's also about viewing agriculture in the same way that we view wild environments that we seek to conserve and to protect and go hiking in, not necessarily to drive a tractor through, right? And what the book is all about is really a moment to stop, to sit back, to breathe, and to understand that even a farmed environment, it's more about relationships than it's about practices, right? Having a relationship with your animals is the best way to understand what they need, right? Like we were talking about earlier, just simply moving your cows to the next day's paddock because it's the next day, right? That's accidental abundance. If abundance occurs, it's just accidental. It's probably a lot better, right, than set stocking, 10 cows in a 30-acre pasture for 30 days and hoping that they feed themselves, right? That's a degenerative environment. That's been proven, right? Don't even have to dive into that. But a step above rotational grazing in terms of really taking a deep dive into really nurturing a relationship with your farm as a living, breathing system that has selfhood in and of itself, right, is to stop doing and to really start being. And so what Wild Like Flowers, it's really a book of short stories and essays, or maybe it's like a wondrous meditation on sunrises and wildness, wildflowers and walks. But it really is a book about you and me and the ecosystem regeneration possible through learning to see the wild gifts, or really the wild opportunities of relationship, right, through regeneration. And so Wild Like Flowers, it's a collection of personal reflections from our regenerative wildland that utilizes the magical gifts of being, not doing, but being, connection and reciprocity and community, to really take a deep dive and probe the larger concerns of modern and really mainstream regenerative rhetoric, In prose, that's a little bit more poetic. It's a very poetic and philosophical read. I really like Doniga Markegard. She's a grass farmer out in the San Francisco, California area. Um, she described it as, she wrote a blurb something like, this is not a how-to book, right? This is about something much deeper than that. This is about the foundational philosophy and poetry of the regenerative movement, regenerative agriculture in particular. And so the book is broken out into many different chapters, all chapters that are true stories from our wildland. They're fun. A lot of people have said that they've cried through most of them, so I guess they're deeply emotional. But they're all intent on really showing the abundance that occurs from an emergent perspective when you look at the farm as a relationship, not as a job, right? Like I say in one part, like moving cows, it's not hard. Just ask them to move. Walk up to a cow and look at it, right? And be in position enough with that cow, right? Whoever it is, and just so that you can look at it and say, like Branya is one of our cows. Just be like, Branya, come, let's go, follow me, right? And the crazy thing is they'll listen, right? Cows are not stupid, dumb, mundane creatures, right, that just walk around eating grass all day. They're incredibly living and personable characters that then eat grass all day, right? It's very human of us to believe that somebody who doesn't look like us can't actually be living and have community in its own sense, have a language in its own sense. And so this book is also a highlight. It is also written to highlight the animacy of the natural world. Animacy in terms of, there's this chapter of a stone. Like I try to write the argument that stones are animate, that they're living, just as a cow or a carrot is living, right? We also tackle the issues of life and death and life, and how death feeds life, and how in order to be fully living, right, we need things to die. And so there's even some pretty deep analysis of what grief is, and how farmers participate quite fully in that cycle, right, which really is the regenerative cycle of birth, growth, life, death, decay, and then rebirth, right? And that rebirth is really what we're trying to foster in our wildland, right? Even when you're looking at trampling and really severely grazing pastures, or even minimally grazing pastures, if you're taking the top third, depending on your management style. I mean, what you're trying to do is take a living system and reset it, and seeing what would come out of that decomposition, right? What is going to be reborn here that is more abundant or taller or more nutrient rich or nutrient dense than it was the last time we were here, right? And so you're always pushing for that rebirth, which means you're always pushing for that death, right? Regenerative farming, in many ways, it's looking to create a very abundant death to then rebirth back into a very, or even increasingly, um, abundant life. So I could talk all day, but do you have any questions for it? I'm sure I could, ramble on for hours.
Well, just a couple of things, and one thing's really minor, but you have footnotes in there. And I have a
Mm.
love of books with footnote. I want to be able to follow the path. And I know that there's people right now saying he's crazy, but I love footnotes. I want to know where you got that and how it came to. So I really appreciate that part of it. I enjoyed your writing. It reminds me of a book, A Very Small Farm by William Paul Winchester. I believe it was published in like
Hmm.
1990 or something. And he's actually a local farmer at the time, and he talked about his process. And as I read your stories in there, and your connection to the land and the relationships, not only your relationships, but relationships of animals to other animals and all, it just reminded me of that book. And that book is one of my favorite books. So I really enjoyed your writing in it. And
Thank you. That's a
when we
blessing.
go back to a question rather than me rambling on, what's your vision for the book?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Um, I have to be honest. I wrote the book in 3 weeks. I had an idea, or really a yearning, that I feel like I had to get words onto paper, and so that's what I did. I dedicated 3 weeks this past autumn to writing the book, and it really was an explosive creative process, if you will. I mean, you write a book in 3 weeks, and tell me how that feels. It's kind of like an emotional roller coaster. But when I started writing the book and I had the first inkling of, or first foundational vision of what the book really could become, I was overwhelmed because I didn't think that this kind of book would sell. I have thousands of books here in my family's library at home, and like, a bunch of farming
Yes.
books. I mean, a lot of my friends are, pretty sophisticated writers here in the farming space, and their books are amazing. And I never felt like I could write a book that would parallel or equal theirs in terms of worth and value, and in what it really gives to the reader in terms of truly actually approaching the regenerative movement. Um, and so I started writing a book about our wildland, describing our processes and understandings and philosophies, and I added poetry into the thing. And I'm a big fan of Shakespeare and his plays. And if you've read the book, I mean, like, I think I use Shakespeare like 10 different times in the book to illustrate something in the regenerative movement. There was one person who read the book that just was like, I learned more about Shakespeare than I did about, um, farming and such, which is probably fine. I mean, Shakespeare is a wonderful thing to
Right.
learn.
Yes.
But I wrote the book, and I sent it out. I sent it out to like maybe 25 to 30 of the pioneers in the regenerative movement, right? Big names like Joel Salatin and Gabe Brown and Judith Schwartz and Nicole Masters and Ninga Markegard. I don't know if I said Joel Salatin or not, but Joel Salatin and people like that. And I just, sent them an email and said, hey, listen, here's the book. Are you interested in reading it and writing a review or a blurb if you feel like it was good enough to receive it? And I'll be honest with you, I'll tell you this completely flat out. I didn't think they would even respond to my email. I totally just, I've never published a book in regenerative ag before. Our popularity as, farmers is growing, but like, for Joel Salatin to respond in an email to me is still pretty cool. And well, anyways, I sent the book to 25 to 30. Let's just use easy math. Let's say 25, and like 23 to 24 of them
Oh,
replied
very nice.
initially. There was only one or two people that didn't, and I'm not even too sure I got their email right. And I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. Like, this is pretty cool. And then all of the blurbs started to come back, and like Gabe Brown, he wrote a blurb for the book that I still just get like goosebumps when I read it. But like, he loved the book. Like, he came back and he was so blessed by the book, and he loved it. And his blurb is unbelievable. You can read it on Amazon or a site wherever you guys buy books. And then Joel Salatin came back, and he was like, everybody needs to read this book. I've been struggling with the balance between like Eastern holism and Western reductionist, and like, this book is the
Oh.
balance. You could call it a devotional. These are all his words. And I'm
Oh,
just
yes.
reading it, and I'm like, oh God, wow, this book is actually. And then Alan Savory, right, the founder of Holistic Management and the Savory Institute, the co-founder of the Savory Institute, and the author of what I believe to be the best book in regenerative ag, Holistic Management, a common sense framework. I can't remember the subtitle, but Holistic Management, the third edition. And he came back and he was like, if there's a poet, or if there's a poet laureate of holistic management, his name would be Daniel Griffith. And I
Oh,
was like,
wow.
I don't
Very
know about
good.
that. I don't know about that. Um, so, anyways, my point is, all of these blurbs started to come back in the reviews from all of these people that I would say are my mentors, not my friends, in the sense where like, I totally see myself learning from them, and we're nowhere at the same, playing field. And they're coming back saying that they're learning stuff in the book, and it was a truly humbling and a truly, my goodness, earth shattering or earth shaking in a good way, a positive way experience for us. And so what we hope this book becomes, right? There's a lot of how-to farming books in this
Right.
movement. The rotational grazing, grass farming, regeneration, local food, sustainable agriculture movement. And those books are needed and wonderful, and I have many, and I hold a lot of them dear. This is not a how to farm book. It's absolutely not. This is why we farm, right? And our hope is that by getting all of these great blurbs from the different farmers who all have their own paradigms and practices, and one person might like poly braid, the other person likes poly wire. That's fine. We can have that conversation. But this book steps beyond
Right.
that, right? I don't care if you like poly braid, poly wire, you like to step in the post from O'Brien, or like to do something else from Premier One. Like, I don't care. Those are conversations that need had if you want to have them. This book is about something entirely different. This is why we farm, right? And how we create, or maybe how we can step back to nurture, right, the gifts that are all around us instead of trying to manufacture in abundance. It is not about abundance,
Right.
right? Like ever since we started our journey into farming, like, our hang weights are increasing, right? Our stock density is increasing. We have more forage in the pastures than we, did last year. All of those things are important, and we measure all of them. That's highly important. Being able to put empirical data behind the regenerative story is, sometimes just as important as the regenerative story. But this book steps beyond that, and it's really a why you farm book, why we farm. And so we hope it inspires some farmers on the edge who are, questioning whether or not they jump into sustainable or regenerative agriculture. And we hope that it takes some people already in the movement to that next step. If there's a primary audience, I would probably say that's this group. People are already in regenerative ag, who are currently rotational grazing, and they want to take a moment to stop, to breathe, to relax, right? And learn to cultivate community and awareness and observation. Um, and then lastly, conscious consumers looking to understand regenerative farming better. One blurb came back saying that, there's a lot of people trying to claim or define regenerative in the regenerative movement. And this book is pretty good at that. That's not the blurb quote
Right.
unquote, but the point is, we really dive into what regeneration means, which I think is interesting.
To me, when I read the stories, it takes me as that, I want to say quote or proverb, but I can't even think where it came from. But it's not about the destination, it's about your journey. And you're in the farm
Mm.
space, you're wildland. It's the journey of the whole system, not just your piece of it. It's everything. I think it's a
Yeah,
good read.
I appreciate that. I do.
So Daniel, where can people find your book?
Yeah, so a lot of different places. Right now, we're running pre-orders through our site, danielfirthgriffith.com. Right there on the homepage, there's a link for it. You can click pre-order. We're running the pre-orders through our site. We're actually not going to be running pre-orders long. Very soon, within the next couple weeks, if not a month, it will be a live published book that you can buy pretty much anywhere. I mean, Barnes and Nobles, Amazon, Walmart, Target, wherever you buy books online, it'll be there. And you can still buy it through our site. We'll make a little bit more money if you do. And so if you're, a big anti-big tech individual and you want to support local, you can always just buy via the site. But it'll be everywhere. BarnesandNoble.com,
There
Books a
you go.
Million.
Very good. Well, Daniel, we've gotten to the point in our podcast where we do our famous 4 questions. It's the 4 questions we ask of every guest. And I stole that blatantly from the Bigger Pockets podcast. So I hope they don't want that back. But our first question on our famous 4 is, what is your favorite grazing grass related book or resource? And we know it's got to be your book, but besides your book, what would be your favorite? And I think you've already said it earlier, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, if I let's see, a book that I hold dear, a book that is always on my desk that I rely on is Alan Savory's Holistic Management. It's a book rich in details, but also very inspiring. If I had to step beyond that into something that's kind of within the general sphere of regenerative agriculture or regenerative societies or maybe permanent societies, my favorite book of all time would be Aldo Leopold's The Sun County Almanac.
Oh, yes.
I would highly recommend this book to anybody in the regenerative space. Aldo Leopold is, in my opinion, easily the greatest writer of the 20th century.
I will have to add that book to my reading list because I have not read that.
It's awesome. I encourage everybody to read it.
Our second question, what tool could you not live without on your farm?
It's funny. We were my dad and I, my mom and dad live on the property with us and farm alongside of us. And tonight we were working on a project in our barn, and we were using a nail gun. And my dad looked at me and he asked this very question. He said, "Daniel, what's the most important tool we have here?" And I sat back and I thought about it. I was thinking tractors, or I could be the smart one and be like, "Oh, the cow. The cow's the best tool." And I thought about these things. And then he looked at the air compressor running it, and we have a huge air compressor. And he was like, "I think it's the air compressor." And so besides taking the easy bait of, the cow is our best tool, or maybe like, holistically managing is the most important part. I don't know. I think our air compressor is used like on a daily level for way too many tasks. So I'm gonna go with that one, the air
I
compressor.
can follow your argument for that. Now, we have not had any other guests say their air compressor, but I can go with that argument.
There you go. Yeah.
What do you know now that you wish you knew when you begin this journey?
That's a really good question. I'm gonna take a pause to make sure that what I say is undeniably true, because it's an important question. I wish in the beginning that I would have understood that fostering relationships and community in the farmed landscape is the most important part. And that everything that we want, right, increased hang weights or finishing weights, better breed back percentages, lower calf or lamb or piglet, mortalities, better lifestyles, more money in the farm business, right? All of these things, more pastures, more grasses growing in the pastures, right? All of these things that we push for, right, are really a product of seeing nature as not something that we work to optimize harvests, right, but something that we partner with to truly maximize our relationship, right, and thereby the communion that flows, not the harvest, but the communion that flows out of that relationship it's unbelievably, well, abundant, but not to keep repeating these two words, but emergent, right? Emergence is really describing something that is really non-mathematical, right? Emergence is 2 plus 2 equaling 10, not 4, but 10 or 12 or 100,000, right? That's emergence, right? And so when you work to and when you I shouldn't say work, but when you work to not work, right? And see the farm as an area, as a canvas to cultivate awareness and relationship, your hang weights increase, and the forage potential of your pastures increase, right? And your breed back percentages go from 85 to 99.999%, right? And all of these things, all of the things that we're pushing for follow when you do the center thing right. And the center thing is that community, right? Is that relationship. In the beginning, I was pushing for, do you move your chicken tractors once a day or twice a day, right? And I thought just by simply moving the chickens more, right, I was going to do something better, right? And then we are like, oh, we got to ferment the chickens feed because
Oh,
Justin Rhodes
yes.
said to do this. And we started fermenting the chickens feed. And it actually was great. It was a great recommendation. I highly recommend, if you're doing chickens, to ferment the feed. We love the system, but we were focused on the system, right? What I'm trying to say here is not to, step back and just be like, I'm lazy, I'm going to sleep in to 9 or 10 o'clock and the cows can move themselves. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is partner with your cows and see them as living, animate, selfhood having individuals that are different from humans, right? We all have different roles in different contexts, right? We're in the passenger seat. They're the ones driving ecosystem succession. And uh, be at peace in that role and see your relationship with the driver, the one that's touching the gas pedal and steering wheel, as one that is built on community, right? Not trying, not via the path of manufacturing abundance, or manufacturing an outcome that was just, not there to begin with, or not possible to begin with. So, anyways, that's what I would say. Seeing the farm as a relationship, not as a system that we need to optimize or maximize.
Excellent advice. And our final question of our famous four questions: where can others find out more about you?
Yes. So, the whole plethora of sources. First and foremost, our farm, or wildland, if you will, Our site is what is it? wildtimshel.com. Timshel, 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 wildtimshel.com. There's all sorts of resources and articles, publications, galleries, things like that on that site. We're also highly active on Instagram. I think it's Timshel_Wildland is our Instagram handle or whatever it's called. Our education, consulting, advocacy work that we do via the Savory Institute, it's called the Robinia Institute. You can find that online, robiniainstitute.com. Robinia is the Latin name for the black locust tree. Just tying that together. Black locust tree is my favorite tree out
very
there.
Good.
So we just call our educational institute that, the Robinia Institute. But I mean, I'm just going to keep throwing websites at you because there's so many. But danielfirthgriffith.com is kind of the foundational center point of it all. You can go there and learn a little bit about me and about the family and what we're doing in the books and the articles and speaking and such. And then it also has links to the farm and the institute and things like that.
Very good. We will put links to all those sites as well as links to purchase your book in the show notes.
Hey, I appreciate that.
Daniel, we appreciate you coming on to the Grazing Grass podcast.
Hey, Cal, it's been my pleasure.
You just listened to the Grazing Grass podcast, helping grass farmers learn from grass farmers. If you're interested in purchasing Daniel's book, we have links in the show notes to purchase from his website. Also, if you pre-order and you send that receipt to book@wildlikeflowers.com, you'll receive a special gift.
I'm a better writer than I am a speaker. And so whenever I'm done with these things, which I never thought when you write a book that everybody would want to talk to you, but I guess everybody wants to talk to you, and I've done way too much talking. And I always hate after it. You're just like, oh, I hope I didn't sound like an idiot. I like writing because you can write and then delete if it sounds stupid. Whereas something like this. Anyways, my point is, thank you for the blessing and the time. I've really enjoyed myself. I hope it was educational or inspirational to somebody. And I hope I didn't look like too much of an idiot. But I'm really just one lazy farmer. Farming too, and I don't mean this to take this more comedic section and turn it back into an episode, but I mean, in many ways, that really is what regenerative agriculture or holistic management is all about, right? I mean, looking at what you have, trying to do your best, and then looking at the earliest feedback loop, right? Really observing, what is coming about due to your management, and either replanning or learning to shift management in a better, more abundant state.
That reflection piece is important in so many places.
Yes.
And the problem is, and I'll get on a little soapbox, the problem is we're too busy for that reflection piece. And you have to stop and have that space so you can reflect. There, you can do what you want with that.
Yeah. There you go. I loved it.
And as always, keep grazing grass.